Hi everyone, it's Joel from 8400 Lights, and today we are going to be transforming this into this. Now these are some old LED trees that I've had in my display for a number of years now. They are just a bunch of LEDs all strung together on about a little over 5-foot tree, and as these have gotten older, some of the LEDs have burned out. So I thought it would be kind of fun to convert this into a pixel tree instead. And we're going to start by just disassembling this. On the base of this, it's rather an ingenious design. I like this, where they're just all held in and tensioned with some springs and clips that clip into the base here. So when I would take this apart and store it, I would just unclip all of my different strands from the base and then go ahead and store it. So here we can see the base of this again, and it has these little attachment points that are part of the base unit. And then again, each particular strand is tensioned with a little spring here and a little clip. And I like this methodology, so I'm going to try and adapt this when I convert this to pixels. And the other nice thing is this just comes apart in pieces. So this is off. And then we're left with the headpiece here. Our next step is going to be to dismantle and take off this headpiece. My next step is going to be to create a new hook head for this tree so that I can attach all of my pixel strips. Obviously that old hook head that I took off is not going to work. So I'm going to make mine out of wood, and I have this plank here that started off as a 2x6, which is a little bit too thick of material for what I want to do. So I ran that through a planer and brought it down to about 1 inch true. A 2x6 is normally 1.5 inches thick. So I used the planer to bring that down to about a 1 inch true thick board. And we're going to use that as my hook head. The other thing I did is I created this little template here that is a number of concentric circles starting at a diameter of 1 inch and then going up a 1/2 inch every circle that you see here. The dotted lines are the 1/2 inch and the solid lines are the full inch. I've thought about this, and we want to make sure that our hook head is as small as possible, but at the same time is large enough to handle all of the hooks that I'm going to be putting into it, and also that I don't crowd the top of my pixels too much. And I've decided that I want to go ahead and use a 3-inch diameter hook head. Okay, here is my 3-inch diameter that I've highlighted in red, and that's just something for me when I go to cut this, that I can make sure I follow the correct line. The other thing that I did on this template is I added these radial lines here in blue for each one of my pixel strips. Now that I've got this taped down, the next thing I want to do is drill a center hole here for mounting onto this pole that had the old hook head on it. And I've determined that the pole is about a 5/8 inch diameter. So I have a 5/8 inch bit in my drill press. And I want to do this now while this is still one large block of wood, so that I can clamp it in place while I drill it. Here is my hook head after I cut it out with the bandsaw. I spent a couple minutes with a power sander, just kind of smoothing some of the edges and making it round, or almost round. To anchor my pixel strips, I found these little anchors. Should work out really nice. They've got this little spring clip on them here to keep things latched in place. Now that I have the new hook head painted white, I am going to go ahead and install the 12 new hooks for the pixel strips. And here is my completed hook head. My next step is to get a measurement of the amount of pixel mounting strip that we need to go from our new hook head down to the base of our tree. And to do that, I'm going to take an easy route and just simply attach a piece of the mounting strip to the hook head, and then lift the hook head up, like that, and then come down here to the base and just kind of see where that gets me. Now I want to allow some amount of space here for my springs, for my tension. So I might come down to this hole here, or maybe this one. So I'm going to mark this hole with a piece of masking tape for the moment. And that will tell me what the last hole that I used was. I've determined that my pixel strip should be a little over 63.5 inches, or a better way to count it might be 65 holes, which is about. So now I'm going to cut all of my pixel strips to 65 holes. Now that I have the first one done, I just repeat the same process until I have 12 strips. Only this time I'm going to use my first strip as a template to lay out when I get to 65 holes. Now I've got all of my pixel strips cut to the correct length. So the next thing I want to do is add a little bit of reinforcement onto the end of each strip. Now technically this is something I probably wouldn't have to do, as there really isn't going to be that much tension on these strips when they're on the tree, but I was concerned over time with those hooks on the hook head and being outside that it may start to pull on this material a little bit and deform it. So Boscayo also sells these little aluminum clips, they called miser clips, that you can get and add to your strips as a reinforcing material. So we're going to add those onto my strips now. Now I want to use a system similar to how the original tree worked in providing tension to each of these, where the original tree just used a spring and a little clip to clip onto the base. But right now I don't really have a good spot where I could attach any springs to these strips here. So I'm going to head over to the drill press and add a couple of holes onto one end of this and just drill straight through the miser clip and the strip itself that I can use to attach a pair of springs to provide my tension. Now these new holes will serve as my mounting points for my tensioning springs. Now the next thing we're going to do is add our tensioning system onto the bottom of the strip here, where we've drilled these extra holes in the strip itself and the little miser clip underneath it. And to build a tensioning system, I got a number of these small springs here, along with this little clip that's called a lanyard clip, I believe. And we're going to use two of the springs and the clip to attach to the end of our strip here, and then the clip will attach to a little point that already exists in the base of the tree frame that I'm currently using. So now we'll just take the end of the strip and we'll take our tensioning assembly here and attach this with cable ties. Now when you're doing these, you do want to try and get the springs to lay flat as much as possible. So you may have to turn them one particular direction or another so that they don't get twisted up, and will give you that nice flat alignment, which will make the tension more even on each side of the strip here. And there, we have added our tensioning system onto the end of this strip here. If you will remember, we made these strips to be 65 holes long. Now if we subtract 1 for the top, which is of course where it's going to hook into our hook head, and 1 for the bottom, which is where we have our tensioning spring, that would leave us 63 available holes for pixels. Assuming we wanted a 3-inch spacing, that would give us 21 pixels and an extra 2 holes, which you could either put on the top or the bottom of this strip. But I wanted to both maximize the number of pixels I was using out of my strings, as well as I didn't really like the look of having 2 extra holes that were unused at either the top or the bottom. So what I'm going to do is actually go up to 22 pixels per string here, per strip. And just instead of at the very top doing a 3-inch spacing, go down to about a 2-inch spacing. So I'll have a pixel here in this spot, and then an empty hole, and then a pixel right here. And it's a small enough change that I don't think anybody is really going to notice, but I do like having that extra pixel in there rather than having this big open space here. The next thing is going to be to start working with our pixels themselves. Now these are the pixels that I got for this project, and they are 5-volt pixels. They come 50 pixels to a string, which will work out rather perfectly in this case. If you remember that I decided on each strip would be 22 pixels long, so I can take one of these strings and maximize its use by doing 22 pixels up, putting a fold in it, and then doing 22 pixels down. So of this 50 pixel string, I'm going to use 44 pixels, so 22 pixels up, 22 pixels down. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and trim off the extra pixels from this string, along with the connectors that it comes with, because I'm going to add my own connectors. So let's talk connectors for a minute. For my input to the entire tree and my output, if I was going to eventually chain into some other type of pixel prop, I'm going to go ahead and use these standard round connectors that, again, I've been getting from Ray Wu to have as my inputs and my outputs. But when I go to connect between the strings themselves, I thought I would try something a little different this year. Now, most of us have used these little 2-pin DuPont connectors for power injection. They also make these connectors in other pinout varieties as well, one of which is a 3-pin variety. So I thought I would try using these 3-pin DuPont connectors to connect between my pixel strips on this tree rather than these larger round connectors. Because these are 5-volt pixels, I'm going to need to do power injection on a fairly regular basis. So basically at the start of every new string, or every 2 strips if you will, I'm going to need to do some power injection. These particular pixels have a nice little feature to them in that they come from the factory with this little power injection lead already added into this first pixel. If this wasn't here, then I would have had to solder in a separate power injection lead when I put my pigtail on. But because this is here, I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of it and simply add my 2-pin connector with my DuPont pins onto this power injection lead. Now that we have all of our pixel strings built, the next step is to insert the pixels into the strip material. So I have here one of the pixel strings, and I have the beginning of the string here with my port for power injection. So this is pixel number 1. And in my case, I'm always going to start with pixel number 1 at the bottom of a strip. So I have my strip here, and this is my tensioning device, so I know that this is the bottom of my string. And I'm just going to go ahead and start inserting these pixels into the strip material, and they just pop right in. And then again, I want 3-inch spacing, which would be 1 pixel and then 2 blank holes, and then another pixel will give me 3-inch spacing on this particular strip. And when I insert these pixels, I want to ensure that my wiring down here stays nice and flat and even and doesn't get twisted. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this on the rest of the strip here. Now I've reached the top of my strip here, and as I talked about earlier, I've got this one odd little bit of spacing here. I could have just left this, but I'm trying to maximize the use of the pixels and the use of the strip itself. So I had this little extra bit here. I could just leave this, but again, I wanted to maximize this. I didn't think it would be that big a deal if I changed spacing just in this one spot, especially at the top. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that last pixel in here. And it'll have a little bit different spacing, but it shouldn't look too bad. And again, I think will prevent having a gap up here at the top, which will actually look nicer. So this is one completed strip. Again, I started at the bottom and came up the top. I've used up half of my pixel string, so I still have a whole bunch of pixels here. So I'm going to grab another strip and then start at the top of that strip and insert these all the way down. Now that we have assembled all of our pixels into our pixel strips, let's go ahead and assemble the entire tree. And here is our completed pixel tree. I hope you have enjoyed this video on how I converted this old single strand, basically LED tree into a pixel tree. It was a fun and easy project to do. If you like our channel, please subscribe and come back and watch our other videos on 8400 lights. Thank you much.